Some children have nice textbooks like this, while others have these rundown textbooks. Some students end up becoming young adults, entering a college classroom, while others end up in prison. Public education is a staple in a child's and adult's life. Whether it's starting elementary school or college, yet my research led to inform me children of color and Black children don't have the same opportunities. In urban areas, their textbooks, supplies, and materials are missing or run down. The public education system failed the urban youth by segregation, public education over the past 20 years, and have been trying to provide for urban underclass families. From incorporating the need of Black teachers to after-school programs to try and help kids stay off the streets from falling into the school-to-prison pipeline. But there's a lack of diverse teachers. That brings me on how the lack of diverse teachers in urban communities affected how African American students perform. School turnarounds try to turn around low-income performing schools so they become accredited. According to White, that isn't the case. School turnarounds are low-level school reforms tied to accountability and policies that are intended to improve low-income schools through top-down and prescriptive mandates. These reforms often fail to engage the reach of students, adults, teachers, and parents and community members within the city. Reforms like school turnarounds largely ruin the cycle of public education. It also contributes to a rise of Jim Crow racial segregation. American public schools, which is present in numerous urban lower income areas across America, greatly affect teachers of color. Racial policies that affect low income and predominantly Black public schools and is countered with simultaneous odd rates of white teachers being hired. The children in the classroom won't know how to connect with a student to teacher ratio who is white. The racial standpoint being predominantly white, as Black teachers only make up 20% of teachers in America, and there's only 2% make up men. Children who live in urban and predominantly Black communities attend K-12 schools, which frequently have a student population of just African Americans or minority groups, who are naturally growth children. In layman terms, children who had the streets raise them. These students have been affected by racial segregation based on their location, funding, social capital, class, and their parents' education as well. This is shown within the school they attend, with the student body being mostly minority groups and white teachers. And the resegregation of public schools, examining parents involved in practice by Voto D. Wanscree. Within urban districts, these numbers are even more pronounced. 3/4 of Black students in Chicago, for example, attend 90 to 100% minority schools. And of those, half attend with high poverty rates, despite learning opportunities in the neighborhood schools, and access to few low quality and low qualified experienced teachers. Alternatively, students of color demonstrate higher academic achievement in racially diverse schools and expect lower teacher rates and dropout rates. This type of segregation doesn't promote the diversity agenda that school districts promote. The lack of African American teachers cuts out the socio-cultural reliability and a bond a student has with a teacher with similar upbringings. And who is a person of color without a connection that a student to look up to as a role model, and eager to show up to class because they know they truly care and can sympathize with what's going on in the child's life? Those same students usually stop showing up to these urban public schools and eventually will find deviant ways to success, like dealing drugs and gangbanging. In addition to the lack of diverse teachers affecting how students perform in low-income school systems, become segregated. School systems are segregated in urban communities, yet there's a lack of black teachers to serve as role models to the youth, rather than their drug leader counterparts. The lack of African American male teachers is drastically low. Some schools have none. A study conducted by Dr. Travis J. Bristol, in which he surveyed over 118 schools in urban environments in Boston. 32 schools had 0 black male teachers. 28 had 1 black male teacher. 15 schools had 2, and over 43 schools had 3 or more. The trend in this data is that the location of the school and race of the principal is that these schools, who had the highest number of black teachers, were in middle-class areas of Boston, with 55% of principals and teachers identifying as African American. However, 32% of principals that were surveyed were Caucasian. But the school that polled with the lowest number of black male teachers has the highest number of black students out of all schools, which doesn't add up. The need of male African American teachers is high in demand. Children of color don't have role models that can keep them out of trouble and build positive relationships with teachers and peers. In African American Males in Urban Schools by Richard H. Milner, Milner creates an outline of what can entitle black students and teachers. His 5 principles were to be enforced so school districts can come up with excuses on why their schools are failing. In particular, teachers and students envision life beyond their present situations, come to know themselves in relation to others, speak possibilities and not destruction, care and demonstrate for the change that they're thinking to change their actions. And Teach for America's Paradoxical Diversity Initiative by Tarenda White states that the demand for black teachers have been displaced from the urban areas to where it mostly affects African Americans and people of color in which they reside, to resorting to white areas. They get displaced in county and private schools and let out of the public school systems that affect most people of color. Black students are usually put to perform remedial tasks where they can surely do harder tasks and even perform as well as their white counterparts in advanced courses. Milner even states, black males need to understand that their future situations can be brighter, and their current situations can be never known or seen by anything but mediocrity. It is probably going to be difficult for that student to envision a different life for himself, since all he knows is the streets. But it's possible as long as you have the role models. And finally today, after weeks of informative research, I've learned that the public education system often fails children of African American descent and various minority groups, and those who reside in urban communities. Their segregation and the lack of a diverse teacher pool, the teachers resort to the children performing poorly in the classroom. The inclusions of No Child Left Behind became Every Child Left Behind because of tracking. And the lack of black teachers in predominantly black communities create unsuspecting segregation. Pause it.